Hello, welcome to The Cave Escape. I'm Caleb Groves.
And I'm Ashton Goolsby.
And we're here to help you escape the cave. Ashton, would you care to explain what the cave is and why we're escaping it?
So we are not talking about spelunking here. We are talking about Plato's allegory of the cave, which is, in short, it's the idea of if somebody was raised in a cave and they'd never seen the light of the above world, and all they had was the shadows coming through the entrance to the cave, the person who's then drug out of the cave will recognize the light above to be far better than the world that he grew up in the darkness. So it's Plato's idea of philosophy leading us toward the light of truth. And once you see the light, you don't really want to go back to the darkness again. Mm-hmm. So it's just an allegory for our journey to find truth.
Right.
Basically.
Yes. We're trying to escape the cave, and we want to help others escape the cave with us.
Yes. It's a joint effort. It's
yes. Right. So we should talk a little bit about who we are, probably. Yep. We're both have backgrounds in classical education, or we were classically educated, I should say.
Yeah.
We both, Ashton, you graduated from New College, Franklin, which is a classical liberal arts school.
2 years ago, yeah.
2 years ago. I'm about to graduate. I have 1 semester left.
So we were together
for like a year.
Yeah, we were there, but did we even have any classes together? I don't think we ever did.
No, because we were 2 classes apart, and so those classes never actually had classes together.
Yeah.
So what was your education prior to college then?
So when I was like 4 or so, my parents were involved in helping start a small classical Christian school in our area in Brentwood, Tennessee, and so I went there. It was K through 3rd is when I went there, and then about that time, my parents pulled me and my sister out, and we started homeschooling, still according to the classical method. And so a lot of it we did at home, just my mom kind of teaching us, or my dad. My dad was actually a Latin teacher for a while. And then we went on to do some stuff through Veritas Press. Later on, middle school, high school, went through all their omnibus curriculum, logic and rhetoric. And then kind of after that, went on to New College, as we already said, and kind of went over some of that stuff again, but then carried it on to the higher level that New College does it at.
Right.
So I've done class education from kindergarten all the way up through college.
Yeah, and you're now your teacher too.
Yeah. Yes. I now teach 4th grade at a small classical Christian school here in Franklin. Actually, just a mile or so up the road from New College.
Yeah.
So, but you have a different background.
Yes. Well, slightly. I was homeschooled for K through 12. Which I don't really know if there's homeschool kindergarten. But I was homeschooled the whole way through. And my mom did Charlotte Mason, or Ambleside Online, which is based on Charlotte Mason.
Yeah.
And so it's slightly different. I'm still kind of learning what that is and why Charlotte Mason is different from other classical education things. She's still kind of one of the main classical education people, I think. Mm-hmm. But I'm still kind of figuring out what my education actually was, because I didn't even know. So I didn't even know what classical education was until I came to New College. Yeah. I knew that my homeschooling was kind of based on quote unquote classical education, but I didn't know anything other than that. And so I came to New College, and then I learned about the Trivium and the Quadrivium, and how those are what the 7 liberal arts are, and what the liberal arts actually mean, and it's not just a college degree in humanities that's super boring.
This is what everybody used to think it was when I was working the drive-thru and then asked me what I was doing.
Yeah, people still. I just actually had that interaction a couple weeks ago with somebody. I was like, I'm going to classical liberal arts. He's like, oh, well, I got a degree in humanities, so it's probably super similar. And I was like,
this is what they always think it is. So I guess that's part of what we're on here to kind of explain, isn't it? Yeah. It's kind of what it is. So as we said, it's a discovery. Right. It's a discovery process is what we kind of have in mind. We'll talk more about that at the end of the episode, but
we want to learn more about the liberal arts and kind of why they're important. What the Trivium means, what it is, what the Quadrivium means, what it is. And then also just kind of other philosophy stuff.
Yeah, because even the liberal arts pulling out the rest of our life as a whole, right? Which is kind of part of the point of studying it is you don't just stay in that vacuum, you kind of carry it out.
Yeah, right.
So this is kind of conversations that we already just have together.
Right.
And we were like, hey,
We should just turn a microphone on.
yeah, let's turn the microphone on. See if if it resonates with other people, if other people have pushback, feedback, anything. But we'll talk more about those things, I guess, at the end.
Yeah.
But getting kind of more into it now.
Yeah. Yeah. So for today's episode, we wanted to talk, kind of talk about what classical education is, and then kind of walk through the Trivium and explain that, so that just to kind of, like explain where we're coming from, like our framework that we're working with. And then next time we'll talk about the Quadrivium and walk through that.
Yeah, we'll have a expert coming in with us next
Yes.
time. Someone who knows more than we do to help us explain the
Yes.
Quadrivium.
Yeah. I wish we had somebody to help us explain the Trivium today. So why don't we talk about what classical education is? We've already kind of talked about it a little bit. But do you have anything else to kind of like add to what we've already said?
Well, so classical. It's I actually heard it was in a talk Christopher Perrin gave, talking about. He said classical is as the idea of going back to the old, and he put the analogy of like Coca-Cola tried to reinvent their recipe, and so they put it out as it was new Coke, but then he said they found out nobody liked new Coke, but rather than putting it back out as old Coke, they call it Coke Classic. So it's the idea of kind of going back to that older way of doing things, but not necessarily, I don't know, because it's old, but because you kind of it's a well tried, well recognized way of doing it.
Okay.
And
so just like the argument, like this is what education was for hundreds of years, and this is what worked. Yeah. So we should just keep doing it, kind of thing. Was he talking about classical education?
Yeah, he was. It was actually a talk he was giving on classical education. He made that analogy.
That's a funny analogy.
But yeah, so this would be kind of the education that typically the medievals, or even dating back to, comes from Greek, Roman roots, things like that. But even people like Tolkien and Lewis would have had an education more like this than most people today would probably have. But
that would have been more because like of their specific areas, like fields of study, right?
Yeah.
Because I think at that point it was still kind of like because like modern, quote unquote, modern education, like more scientific. Yeah. Which is like starting to happen like mid 1800s, I think.
Yeah. And they do this to what they've called the 7 liberal arts. And so liberal, it doesn't mean leftist. It is not that kind of liberal. It's this idea of liberating arts. It's the arts that it frees your mind and it enables you to think about just reality and creation and things like that in a different way. So it's the idea of you're freeing your mind to think about these things.
Yeah, kind of the point is like part of the purpose of studying the liberal arts in classical education is to understand the world as a whole and like as a unified, like everything is one thing, everything is connected to everything else kind of. There's like this idea, I forget, this is a super old idea and lots of people have talked about it, but I can't name any names because I don't remember. But like the idea that like all of knowledge is one in the Holy Spirit, I think. And like all of knowledge is one thing, and so you're learning about things, but you can't know one thing fully without knowing everything.
Yeah.
And that just means that you can't even know one thing fully because obviously you can't know everything. And so you could study one thing for like forever. And you would just learn all these other things about everything else because of how connected everything is. And so classical education in the liberal arts is a way of understanding the world and knowledge in that way, which is a more correct understanding of what knowledge is, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's kind of part of the problem with like modern education, the way people think today, is that everything's separated out. And you've got like all these different subjects, which are all different. Yeah. And they're not like there's no overlap. I mean, like they probably wouldn't say that there's no overlap, but you still like they're highly categorized.
Well, it's like you put math in a category and you put music in a completely separate category,
which is absurd.
Math and music are obviously related. The harder jump would be though, even math and literature are related.
Oh yeah.
So the classical education model is an understanding of all of this as aspects of God's creation they're connected because they all exist in the mind of God.
Right.
So we can connect them. Not saying, well, this is math time. Well, math time is still applicable in history and reading literature books and obviously science and music and other things too. But even Bible class, I'll bring that up with my students all the time, the importance of numbers in the Bible as we're reading the Old Testament right now. But,
Yeah.
so I guess we should kind of explain we keep talking about the liberal arts. I guess we should explain what they are. Can you give us the list of what they are?
There are 7. And there's the Trivium, which is the first 3, and the Quadrivium, which is the second 4. The Trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So it's like they're known as the tools of learning. Too, is kind of was popularized by Dorothy Sayers' essay, "The Lost Tools of Learning," and they're kind of the how did I hear it described? They're like the language arts kind of. And then the Quadrivium is arithmetic, geometry, astronomy or cosmology, and music or harmonia.
Yep.
And those are the like mathematical arts. So it's like kind of a way of seeing all of the created order in terms of number. And so like arithmetic would be just the study of number, geometry is number in space, music is number in time, and astronomy is number in space and time. And so so that's what the 7 are.
Yeah. And typically when most people think classical education, they think the first 3. The Trivium are the more ones people are more aware of if you're in those circles versus the Quadrivium. So our goal for today is we're going to, as we say, go through the Trivium. What are the Trivium? And the next time we'll have somebody help us with the Quadrivium more. Yeah. So real quick, there's we read down Dorothy Sayers' quote here. So Dorothy Sayers wrote her essay. It's actually, I think she delivered it as a speech, I believe, originally. The Lost Tools of Learning, which is she kind of outlines more specifically the Trivium than the Quadrivium, as she deems them the tools of learning, and that she ties them to the stages of childhood development and education. But you want to go on and read that before I get too far?
Right. Taken by and large, the great difference of emphasis between the 2 conceptions holds good. Modern education concentrates on teaching subjects, leaving the method of thinking, arguing, and expressing one's conclusions to be picked up by the scholar as he goes along. Medieval education concentrated on first forging and learning to handle the tools of learning, using whatever subject came handy as a piece of material on which to doodle, until the use of the tool became second nature.
Yeah. So she's making the point here that typically, this is true a lot of times in like education now, we expect kids very young to be able to reason through the things that they're learning already, but before they really understand what they're doing. So she puts it in stages of helping the kids get to the point where they can reason through things and understand them when it's more applicable to the way their mind has been developing. And then she says the Quadrivium, because obviously you have to have the subjects in there at some point. The Quadrivium are the subjects to be learned. You can intersperse them with the other 3, the Trivium arts, but they're more. She says like if you can, artist has to learn to draw by doodling on something. You give them these arts, and they practice their reasoning, their rhetoric, things like that on these other 4 arts. But then they move on later to study them.
Right. But you have to learn how to use the tools before you actually go to study them.
Yes. So I guess should we just go on and jump into grammar?
Yeah, go ahead.
So grammar, as she outlines it, it's learning basically just the facts and the language of just subjects in general. So she also nicknames this the pole parrot stage, which is just, if you've ever been around a lot of little kids, they like to repeat what they hear. So giving these kids facts that they can remember, teaching them the for lack of a better term, the grammar of the different subjects. These are the things you need to know in math. These are the things you need to know in history. Getting them to remember things like dates, things like this, and then they'll use those later on. But recognizing, like, my 4th graders, a lot of times they like cut and dry yes and no answers. So providing them with the facts that they can remember, and then we'll get them to think through and reason them out later.
Right. In the logic stage.
In the logic stage, yes. So the logic stage, she also nicknames this one the pert stage, because if this is usually by the time that someone becomes a teenager, and if there's one thing teenagers are known for, it's for being contrary and liking to argue with their parents and other adults. And so
even a little bit before that, I would think, kind of like preteens, middle school.
True, yeah. But teaching them about the states that they like to push back against ideas. They're starting to think more for themselves, getting them in the habit of right thinking. So helping them to understand reasons why this is a good conclusion to reach, this is a bad conclusion to reach. There's a process through which you have to go to make an argument. You can't just state, well, so and so told me, therefore it must be true.
Right.
You have to explain and logically, validly deduce why is this true.
Yes.
So now they have the facts from the grammar, but they're also learning to sort through these facts and kind of see which ones are true, which ones are simple, which ones are more complex. Because not everything's always cut and dry, true or false, right or wrong. They have to reason through them a bit more. And then once they've done that, they can move then on to what she calls the rhetoric stage, or she calls it also the poetic stage. Because there's a point too where they, I think even Shakespeare said in As You Like It's one of my favorite plays. But you know the All the World's a Stage.
Oh yeah, my siblings actually have that memorized.
Oh, I didn't even know.
Yeah,
too.
I didn't memorize it. I memorized it recently.
But he goes through. He says, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their interests. And one man, his time plays many parts. His acts being 7 ages. And he goes through and he outlines them. And one of them is, he talks about like the lover who's making all these ballads to his love and thing. That I think that's kind of what she's getting at with the rhetoric or the poetic stage, that they like to express themselves and be heard, and they have this just desire to speak and be heard and express themselves. So teaching them how to do it well with good rhetoric. So now they have the ideas, the facts that they've learned. They've learned to sort through them and reason with them, and now they're learning to express them back in a way that is enjoyable to listen to, that people will listen to.
Be persuasive too.
Yeah, because if I just give you a speech and if it's all factually true and logically worked out, but it's the most boring thing you ever heard,
right?
You're never gonna listen to it or pay any attention,
So, or even want to believe it. Yeah. Probably.
Yeah, and it's also like, I remember one thing we talked about when doing rhetoric was you have to have the goodwill of your audience in order for your speech to land.
Yeah.
Getting
or like ethos.
Yeah, ethos. You want your audience to
trust you.
Yeah. So if in the end, if they hear you and you are correct, but they don't feel the desire to actually act upon what you've said, then what you've said is pointless. So it's having the ideas, reasoning through them logically, but then also presenting it in a way that people actually see the importance of it.
Yeah, because there's like, I feel like it was a triangle. There's 3 things. There's ethos, pathos,
logos.
Oh, and logos, right. Yeah. So the content needs to be true, which would be logos. Pathos would be delivering it with like emotion, kind of like loosely.
I can't.
Isn't pathos kind of emotion?
I can't.
It's like with feeling, kind of. I want to say that.
That sounds right.
Like the connecting with your audience. Yeah. You want your audience to resonate with it, and you want them to feel something when you're speaking. Yeah. And then ethos would be your character.
Yeah.
So the 3 parts is you, your audience, and your content.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you want to be doing all of those things well, and that's how. Yeah. To give a good speech or like speak rhetorically.
And so these 3 arts, the Trivium, which she did in the Lost Tools of Learning, because they were lost and she's trying to recover them. But she's also saying this is in general how you learn things. And she had a quote. I don't think we wrote this one down, but she was saying that it does a student no good to get through a subject if he can't remember how he learned it. Because the idea with classical education is you want to create not just people who are content to have learned things and then move on, but somebody who can return to them again, or who can then take it and move on to learn other things. Yeah. So I think the school I teach at says they want to create lifelong learners. So it's kids who they know how to learn, so when they graduate, they can continue going out and applying this to keep learning and learn more things about whatever they want, whatever they discover. They know how to attack it and to learn it systematically and understand it better than perhaps the average Joe off of the street.
Right, yeah. But then the thing is that most people will just stop there and be like, it's good to learn the tools so that you can learn the tools. And then now you're really prepared to go and learn stuff well. and they think that's kind of classical education is just you learn the trivium so you can do the tools.
Yeah.
And then that's where they stop. But we disagree with that. We think the quadrivium is actually probably even more important.
Yeah.
Like the purpose of the trivium, like of learning the tools, is to use them on the quadrivium almost.
Yeah. To move on to, because then the quadrivium, which we'll talk about more next time, is more of explaining reality through the study of number.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to get too much in that. We'll save that for our special guest next time.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's a brief overview of the trivium, and I guess if you were looking for a little more detail on what we've said, Dorothy Sayers' Lost Tools of Learning, it where we drew most of this from. You can look that up. I think ACCS has that online somewhere.
Yeah.
There's also other books
There's
that
a lot of
we
books.
can get to at some point further. We'll get into some more books as we continue going further episodes. But
yeah.
So do we want to talk before we end?
Yes.
I guess let's explain kind of a
What we're
little
doing.
more. What are we thinking about
Right.
as we proceed forward with this podcast?
Yeah. So like the point of this, we want this to be. I mean, kind of we said before, we want it to be more discovery, kind of than informational. We're doing this podcast because we want to learn, and we want to explore these concepts and explore classical education as a whole and philosophy. And so we're probably gonna try to interview people and ask them questions. Probably read books and just go through the books together.
It's more of a conversation. So it's the idea of like continuing conversation with people.
Like the great conversation is what we're trying
a great conversation.
to get into that.
No, we'll get into that a little more next time too.
Right, yeah. Because I just don't really understand exactly what that's supposed to be.
our guest next time is going to help us with that as well. But just continuing conversations that maybe we started in school, trying to further our own understanding. So for that reason, we don't want it just to be the two of us talking just in a room with a microphone by ourselves. We want to encourage feedback, pushback, questions.
Yeah.
Whether you have a question or if you have an answer to a question that maybe we have, it's
right. Or if you disagree with us, if we say something that sounds wrong, please tell us that you think it's wrong, and then we'll look into it because we don't want to be wrong. Right?
Yeah. If there's something that you think we're wrong on, we want to know. It's us wanting to grow.
Right. Or if you have more thoughts on something, or like if a different way of thinking about a thing, please let us know. We have a website. And a blog that we'll be kind of posting on some stuff. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yes. So we have a blog up. It's the web link. It's the caveescape blog.blogger.com.
.blogspot.
Or sorry, .blogspot.
The caveescape blog.blogspot.com.
Yes.
But it's also the only blog.
Yeah. So if you just Google the Cave Escape blog, it's the top one that pops up.
Yep.
So it'll pop up.
Pretty special.
And,
wow,
that was interesting.
That was a dog outside. Whoa. I've never heard that dog here before.
Really?
At least, well, maybe I have. I just haven't noticed.
Well.
Interesting. Okay, well,
at any
continue.
Rate, so if you Google it, it's the only one that pops up right now. But our plan with it is we're going to try to put out a very just short little synopsis of each episode as we post the episodes online, and then there's comments enabled on it. So if you have anything to comment on the episode, put it there, and we'll look at it. And because like we said, we want to grow, and hopefully if any of this is new to you or helpful, that's great as well.
Yeah.
Let us know. We'd like to know that too. But also if you have anything to the contrary, we would welcome that as well.
Yes.
So that's there, and we'll put some other stuff on there from time to time too. Probably other just thoughts that we have that we talk about. So yeah, that's all we have today. Next time, as we said, we'll be moving on to the quadrivium with the special guest that we have lined up.
Secret.
Who has agreed just to help us out with this. But until then, thank y'all for listening. Come back next week and take care.